Jo, thank you so much for being here with me on the Entrepreneurial Success Podcast. Oh my goodness, if some of you were here already, Jo and I already had such an amazing conversation. But I think even so much so, you're going to really appreciate today's episode because we're going to talk all about GDPR and data protection. And I don't want you to think, oh my gosh, this is going to be boring, because these things are actually really important and you're going to have to understand it and you're going to have to get to grips with it at some point. But before we get started, Jo, why don't I hand over to you so you could quickly introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Hi everyone, I'm Jo Brianti and I'm a GDPR and data protection consultant based in West London. I started my journey to data protection officer way back in 2017. I'd read an email that came out of the government about new legislation. I started reading up, started looking at it for my own business, and very quickly became somebody who people asked questions about it. And I broadened my knowledge. I started looking at the EU content around this piece of legislation and what we needed to do. And over the lockdown, I trained as a data protection officer, and I'm now fully accredited as a data protection officer with European law and programme management. And very shortly, we'll be doing my privacy technology accreditation. So this is my thing. I love it.
I know. And you know what? The first time you and I met, I remember when you started talking about GDPR, it was one of those things, your eyes just lit up. And I was like, I've never seen anybody get so excited about GDPR and data protection like you do. And I think, you know, this is kind of exactly made for you. And because you're an analytical person as well, so you really like diving deep into all of these kind of nitty-gritty things and trying to understand it. Where for some of us, it's like asking us to read a law book or something. We're like, what? This is just not our thing. But, you know, that's why we get people like yourselves who just really enjoy it and who can also guide us and help us about it. So let's talk a little bit about GDPR. I want to dive into talking and just expanding on it a little bit because we know the term or the abbreviation, but what is GDPR and data protection exactly? And what is it that the audience should understand about it?
So to give it its full title, it is the General Data Protection Regulation. The regulation came out of the EU, and then all the member states embedded that piece of legislation in their own statute book. So in the UK, it is the Data Protection Act 2018. And while much has been made of how complicated it can be, for small businesses, it doesn't really have to be that complicated. And there are things that you can do in your business that automatically help you to comply without having to do GDPR. So for instance, let's just say you're creating an online form to collect data from your clients. Have a look at that form, have a think about, do I actually need every single piece of data on there that I'm asking for? How is that going to help me as a business owner service my client? What do I need to do with it? And if the answer is, actually, I don't need that to deliver my service or to help my client, don't ask the question. Don't put it on the form. Instantly, data minimization, part of your compliance. So little tweaks like that can make you compliant without you even thinking about it. The key thing about data protection is that you are protecting your clients and you are safeguarding the information that you process, i.e. collect, store and use about them.
Yes. And you know what? I think when it came out in 2017, when there was talks about it, 2018, I did a lot of research on it myself because I needed to understand more about it as well. But again, it was just one of those things where I was like, oh my gosh, there's all of these things going on, and they're bringing in this new legislation, and what is going to happen? And, are we still going to be allowed to collect people's email addresses? Are we still going to be allowed to collect people's addresses? And it was just a huge hoo-ha going on. But even now, as a business owner, I can kind of see actually that it's not as bad. You just got to make sure that you tick some of the boxes and that you are compliant in some ways. And I love the example you gave there. It's just, when you collect data, you don't need their date of birth. You don't need their physical address. You don't need all of these things. You just need the things that are going to help you to serve them as a client. And I think it's so valuable. So why is it that we need to be compliant with this legislation as business owners in particular? Why do we need to be compliant with it?
Well, first things first, in the regulations, there are some pretty significant fines, and that can be up to 4% of your annual turnover. And I know that at the time, everybody talked about 20 million euro fines. The reality is, if you're only earning 100,000, 50,000, 20,000 a year, nobody's going to be fining you that much. But they will fine you if things are really badly wrong and it is due to negligence, or it's due to, I've not even bothered, it's not for me, that kind of attitude. If you get caught out and you've got that attitude, you will be in trouble. But also, it's important for people to know that if you're sanctioned by the ICO, your name goes on a register and it's searchable. So if you're then applying for a contract to deliver a service, or you're advertising for something and somebody does due diligence, they can check that. It could be a point where they check, and then they'll find out what happened in the instance that you were sanctioned. So there's a reputational, there's a financial risk, but also, you don't want to, I suppose, fall out with your clients because you've suddenly got to ring them and say, there's this been horrible accident in my business, your credit cards or your medical details or whatever else it is, I don't know where it's gone. I don't know who's had access to it. You've got to speak to the bank. So you're creating problems for your clients when your services is to support them and to make their lives better. Yeah. So, there are some really, really fundamentally easy things that you can do to help you with data protection generically. And it's things like your password. Don't share it. If you've got a VA, use LastPass or any of the other types of repository and securely share it where they don't have access to that password. So they can't change it. They can't lock you out of your system. If you're using a VA, are they the right VA to give all the access to all the data? Or, can you minimize what data they're seeing? And by the way, I have a VA, so I'm not casting any reputational damage against VAs. I'm being very functionally sensible here. When you think about your password, never ever use the same password for all of your different systems. Do not write all of your passwords on yellow stickies and put them in a halo around your monitor. Do not write them in a lovely little notebook. You might have gone out and bought a very special one. It's beautiful, but don't write them down. LastPass, Dashlane, 1Password, it's really important. Make sure they're complicated, lowercase, uppercase, numbers, special characters. Sometimes you can use the 3-word approach where you use 3 random words, and you might say cat, apple, bus. really random words and then mix up numbers and special characters in amongst that. You can also use passphrases, but make sure they're unique, make sure they're difficult, because that's your first line of defense. Second line of defense, every piece of software you have will offer you multi-factor authentication. And this gets really annoying, doesn't it? You've got to have your phone and it sends you a text message, or you've got to have that little app to create the digit in it. That is your second line of defense. And those two things together, a strong password and that, are helpful as a barrier to prevent people getting in.
Yeah.
Then the other things with your data protection processes is think about how you're managing data, you know, deletion, how long are you storing it, what's your data retention? If you've come to that end period, make sure you're managing it in the right way. So those are some fundamentals that will help.
Yeah. No, it's really interesting because, you know, it made me think as well on, for us as business owners, obviously one of the major key things that we all have or should have is an email list.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, a lot of people still rely on things like Hotmail or Yahoo. A lot of people still rely on Outlook even sometimes. But what would your kind of view be on platforms where you can grow and build an email list on, such as Aweber, MailChimp? I mean, gosh, there's so many others. I can't even think of them all now. But what would your views be on these kind of platforms and you know, how they are set up to be GDPR compliant?
So, as you've said, a mailing list is fundamental to your business. You know, you need that to build relationships and to nurture. So there's two parts to a mailing list, right? You've got to think about what is the legal basis for me to collect and process. So when we're talking about a mailing list, we're usually talking about 2 of the 6. And we're looking at either consent or legitimate interest. Now, consent is usually the strongest one, but if you're absolutely relying on consent and somebody withdraws their consent, then you can't do anything with that data. The consent is gone and you have to leave it. And I'm kind of sort of shortening it very much in that because there's more in it. But what people often miss is that if they have a client who is paying the money, who's a recent client, they can be automatically segmented and added to a mailing list because they're paying. So there's a legitimate interest. If I've bought your service or if I've been part of your program, I've made a financial commitment to you. So there's a legitimate interest that I might be interested in your value add. And I know that you'll say this, but you don't use email just to sell. You should be using it to nurture your relationship. And so therefore a significant portion of your email is giving value. And I remember when I very first started in business, somebody said to me, you need to apply the 80-20 rule. So 80% of the content you give away, and in this case, the emails, will be full of value, tips, hints, oh, this, that, and then 20% is sales focused. So there is a legitimate interest if I've purchased something for you. So you can safely put my name onto your list because I bought something from you. A cold prospect who might be coming to you through either your website or through social media, a lot of people will use legitimate interest then. And I looked at one this morning where they put a brilliant lead magnet. I really wanted the lead magnet, but then they asked me on the sign-up form for my telephone number. And because I wouldn't give them my telephone number, and then because I wouldn't consent to them contacting me by telephone, they wouldn't allow me to sign up to get the lead magnet. Right? So because I haven't given my consent, and I don't want to give them my consent to have my telephone number, they've lost a possible connection with me. So when I talk to people about consent and lead magnets, what I always say to people is ask them to give you the name, email address, make sure that there is a link at that point to your privacy policy and a statement that says we are collecting this data in line with our privacy policy, and then offer them the opportunity to sign up for your newsletter. And it must be an active consent. I must sign in, right? So I must tick the box, or I must give some sort of active confirmation. Now, if you mandate, like that case study I've just said to you about, that's not consent, because I'm mandated. So you're not giving me consent, you're making me opt out.
Yes.
So that's not true consent. So if people consent and they actively segment those, you can put those into a nurture sequence and onto your mailing list. Those people that just want to receive your download, send them the download and invite them to sign up again for the newsletter. Maybe a few days after you sent them the download, send them one email, say, thanks for signing up for the download. Hope that you got value from XYZ. These are some additional tips that support what was in the download. If you'd like more content like this, sign up. Give them a button to subscribe again. If they don't subscribe, you can't market to them, because they haven't granted consent and the relationship is not big enough to be legitimate interest, like a paying customer. So that's how you manage your email marketing. And it's really important that you get that sign up right, because you want the people who are on your list, and this is thinking sort of slightly more in a businessy perspective, but you know, you'll know yourself, Henriette, you really don't want thousands and thousands of people on your list if they're not engaged, they're not reading your emails, they're not clicking through, and you know, that can be quite a big cost. You know, if you've got a list of 2,000 people and you know, you started having to ramp up how much you're paying for 2,000 people, if only 1,000 people are actively opening your emails, then that's cost. It's not, there's no return on investment on there, is there? And also then linking that back to your GDPR and your data management, you think about, you know, if these people are what you would call stale, they're clearly not interested. They were mandated perhaps to sign up for your freebie, but they're not interested in your service, they're not reading the emails. So, you know, take a business decision about how you deal with those. Do you do some sort of re-engagement and try and warm them up again, make them interested? Or do you take the decision that, do you know what, they haven't read anything of mine in 12 months, I'm going to unsubscribe them? You reduce your business costs, you've cleaned up your data, and you've got a more engaged list that is interested in you. So it's a win-win from a business and a GDPR data protection perspective as well.
Yeah, it's so funny that you say that, because actually just about a week and a half ago, I actually went through my email list and did a bit of cleaning up, as they call it. And literally just went to check those people who've not been as engaged, and I just went and unsubscribed them, because it's true what you're saying, you are paying for that list. You know, the bigger your list is, the more you're going to start paying for that platform, and it's just going to be a cost at the end of the day. It's going to be an expense. The other question I have for you is, you know, for us as business owners, having that email list, I've had this question quite a few times as well, but I would like to hear your professional take on it. Is when you set up a list, obviously there's an option there to make it GDPR compliant, whereby if somebody were to sign up to your list
Yeah.
Before they get added to the list, they will get an automated email that they need to go and say, I accept
Right.
to be added to this list.
So the
double opt-in or the
double opt-in.
double opt-in, yes. So would you suggest that people have that done using a platform? Is that kind of like a legitimate thing? You have to do it.
It's not, no. The process that I've just talked about, where you have the form, it doesn't matter which way you do it, there's got to be a link. That's a legal requirement. So wherever somebody signs up, there's the link to the privacy policy.
Yeah.
If you go through the process where I fill in the form and then I'm either taken to a success page where I download, or you email me the download, and then 1 week later you follow up, or 3 days, whatever it is, follow up, but only talk about the download that you've just provided me with. Give me some more value to encourage me to be interested, yes, and invite me to subscribe. If you follow that process, you don't need to do the double opt-in, because when you do an opt-in, it doesn't matter whether it's Active Campaign, Aweber, Constant Contact, MailChimp, MailerLite, the list, as you know, goes on and on. Because of not just GDPR, but CAN spam and COPPA and CCPA in the States and various other legislation, they build in the ability to take a date stamp and a time which the person who subscribed is there. So if there's ever any question about, well, when did I subscribe to your list, you can go into that person's record in the email tool. You can take a screenshot and it will say the date, time that they subscribed. So you can evidence that.
Yes.
Now, there will be other people who will say, you do have to use the double opt-in, but GDPR doesn't say you must use a double opt-in. GDPR says that when you collect data, you must understand the legal basis. Is it consent? Is it legitimate interest, etc.? And it says that you must do that in an appropriate way. You must make sure they have access to the privacy policy, which is why I'm saying put a link somewhere on that sign up form and just say to people, I'm collecting this data in line with my privacy policy, link so they can open it and read it. 90% of people won't, but if you do that, you're compliant, job sorted. So there will be people who will have a different view. And I've had conversations with people who've told me that, no, you must have the double opt-in, but nowhere in GDPR does it say there must be a double opt-in. It says you must be able to demonstrate how, and that you've had the consent, or that there is a legitimate interest that you can justify. Yeah. And that's all it says.
I'm so glad you shared that, because I think, at the end of the day, it just comes back down to the basics of how you operate in your business. And it comes through with, when people do end up on your email list, it's about building relationships. That's the main thing. Yeah. And I'm so glad you mentioned it as well, because yes, I'm full on talking about your email list is not there to sell. That, that will come, but your email list is there to build relationships with people. And I'm so glad you shared that, because it comes back down to how you're using that as a system and as what I call as a strategy in order to help you grow your business, instead of just going out there and selling to your email list, because that's where you're going to get the most unsubscribes. Trust me.
Absolutely. And when you mention unsubscribes, that's the other thing with your email marketing. You can do all sorts of really creative things around that unsubscribe process. I unsubscribed from a newsletter the other day, and the sort of the success page that came up when you've unsubscribed from our list. We're so sorry to see you go. And, you know, it wasn't just that very basic, bland kind of, can you tell us why? There was a genuine kind of, what have we done? Are we not the sort of service you want? Kind of thing. And actually, it was so interesting the way that they had done this that I thought, you know what? I'm going to give them another go. So I pressed the button to resubscribe, and, you know, I'm going to give them a couple more months and look at their emails again, because there was a genuine kind of value point there. And all of the tools will set up that unsubscribe, but it's amazing how many people don't pay attention to that sort of unsubscribe piece there, and, you know, use that as a, you know, are you really sure you want to go? And people might just say, well, yes, actually I do, that's fine. But you could be using that, you know, in a way that tries to just build that ratio, try and restore that relationship, you know?
Yeah, exactly. From your point of view, what is the kind of advantages versus the disadvantages of being GDPR compliant?
So,
I mean, I'm sure there's quite a few, so you don't have to go into all of them.
So for me, being compliant doesn't have to be a big job. You know, if you look at the way you operate and think about your process flow, your customer journey, look at things like those forms we were talking about. Do you actually need all the data that you're collecting? How many times have you looked at your CRM system and thought, is that person actually still in business? Is that email address up to date? These are good practice and best practice business activities that we should all be doing. And if we're doing some of those best practice things and they're embedded in our business, then we're doing a good way to being GDPR compliant, right? The negative, I suppose, of being GDPR compliant is that there are times when it will bring you a bit of overhead. So, for example, if you're looking for a new email marketing tool or a new CRM system, instead of just sort of saying to, I don't know, your favorite Facebook group, I need a CRM system or I need an email marketing tool, what do you think? You will get 400 different replies in that group saying, I use this and it's the best thing, or I use this. Step back, think about what you need it to do in your business. Think about what you want to achieve by implementing this tool. And then once you've done that, then look at the key tools and think about, and this is where the overhead comes in, because you've got to think about all these things, but there are some key things that you have to look at and understand. Where are they sending your data? So if you're using a CRM system and you're storing very sensitive personal information, finance, you might be saying medical or health, where is that data actually going? If it's in the cloud, that could be anywhere in the world. If that's anywhere in the world, is that GDPR compliant? How are you going to protect it? Do you know whether they've got relevant security protections in their business in order to protect the data you're storing? So there are some technical elements to it that I think can be the downside and are more difficult for people who might not have that technical understanding. Whereas on the plus side, if you are embedding it from day one in good practice, you're kind of there or thereabouts in some elements.
No, it makes absolute sense. And I think, you know, just looking at it from this perspective, this conversation that we're having, I think it takes a lot of the pressure of people who's thinking, oh my gosh, GDPR, and just a little bit more focus and saying it's not the end of the world. You know, as long as you deliver on best practices, you keep things clean, everything will be fine.
Yeah.
So from your perspective then, can I ask, is there one major tip that you can give the audience on what it is that they need to do to start maybe being more GDPR and data protection compliant, or one tip on what they can start doing now in order to just make sure that they fall in line with all of this? What is the one thing that you think they need to start off with?
Oh, well, the first thing, as I mentioned before, you think about your security, your passwords, your multi-factor authentication, and think about who you're sharing the data with. So check your VA. Where are they based? Who are they sharing it with? What is their security practice? Are they working in a cafe where somebody can look over their shoulder? Are they, sharing their laptop that they work on with the whole family? Those kinds of questions, because the fundamental thing, before you even think of all the processes and all of that stuff, is protection.
Yeah.
So implement good basic husbandry, due diligence around what you're doing, where you're working, how you're protecting things. Yes, there may be other things behind that, but at least that's the one big step. Good passwords, multi-factor authentication. I don't promise it's the be all and end all, but it's a really good place to start.
Yeah, and it makes you feel a little bit more comfortable knowing as well that you're secure with that first step. So yeah. I agree with you 100%. Oh my gosh, Jo, I think we can talk about GDPR forever.
Absolutely, I could.
Oh, I'm sure you can. Now, to wrap everything up, you've got an amazing freebie available for everybody. This is top tips on website compliance. Now, I know we spoke about data protection, GDPR, but this works a little bit hand in hand there as well. But this is more overall with the website. So tell us a little bit about what this freebie is all about, what these top tips are. Please don't share them because we want to give it to the audience. But share just a little bit about what this freebie is all about and some of the benefits of what they can expect.
So I've created a mock website page, and I show you all the different areas on a website page of what you need to have, where you need or where you should or could have these things. And then I've got a list of all the things that must be on your website. So it's not just GDPR, but there are other things you need to think about around website compliance. So I've got all of that in a document, so you can just check what you're doing.
Oh my gosh, and I think everybody is going to need that because, with all of the legislations and everything changing on a constant basis, protecting ourselves as business owners, obviously we need to know all of these stuffs and start putting it in place. Because, as we know, the World Wide Web, it's out there, everything is visible, so we got to be protected in every single way. So for those of you listening, we'll have the link below in the show notes. You can go and download these top tips yourself, go and have a look at your website, have a little bit of an overview over it. And more importantly, if you want to have a chat with Jo regarding your GDPR, if you're not sure if you're GDPR compliant and you maybe just need to have somebody's eyes who are an expert over it, then by all means, feel free to get in touch with Jo. I've got all her links below in the show notes, so feel free to reach out to her, and I'm sure she'd be more than happy to have a chat with you in order to check on to see that you are legitimate, basically. Again, thank you, Jo, for taking the time and being here with us. I really appreciate it. And yeah, we'll be in touch very soon because I'm sure we've got more to talk about.
Absolutely. Thank you. It's been lovely to be here with you and your audience.
You're very welcome. Speak soon.